And then we have to talk about a term, and I don't think this term I didn't find it in the OpenStax book, but transport maximum. So it's related to the reabsorption actually, not secretion. But what is that maximum rate, or it can be applied to secretion, but I'm going to talk about it as it relates to reabsorption. So what transport maximum is basically how fast or what's the maximum rate you can actually move things from one side to another in terms of membrane transport. Now we're in the kidneys, right? And where are we transporting things between in the nephron? We're transporting things between the urine that's forming in the tubule and the surrounding capillaries. So transport maximum is the maximum rate you can actually bail out things from the filtrate or in forming urine back into the capillaries of the nephron. So I like to use this analogy. So like TV shows, I mean, I think this was the original start. So they're at their transport maximum. They can't keep up. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I Love Lucy was the original of that gag, but it's like a comedy classic. That's why you always see it in like media every so often. So it's a transport maximum. So what's the analogy here? So again, my analogy is that the renal corpuscle, where you're doing the filtrate, that's the original source of the filtrate, right? And that filtrate, that fluid, is going to travel down your renal tubules. As it travels down the renal tubules, well, where's the first part of the renal tubule? It's the proximal convoluted tubule. Notice that they were grabbing things from the conveyor belt and trying to save it and salvage it, right? So that's what these transporters lining your PCT are like. They're like these little workers that are trying to reclaim things like glucose, vitamins, amino acids from your PCT. But what if you have so much glucose, so much amino acids, so many vitamins coming down the chute and going down to, or going through into ending up in your filtrate and your PCT? Well, if you're limited by the amount of actual transporters you actually have on surrounding the PCT. Therefore, if you have too much of these substances that your transporters are trying to reclaim, it's going to exceed their maximum rate. And again, the maximum they can actually reclaim and reabsorb from the PCT, that's the transport maximum. So yeah, these are little transport proteins. Okay, so then with our renal glucose transport maximum, do I want you to know the value? Maybe if you're going to advanced A&P or medicine, you might need to know this. But there is a maximum rate. So what happens is this is the maximum rate you can reabsorb in your kidneys on average per minute in terms of reclaiming glucose from your filtrate. So what about hyperglycemia? Okay, and this is again, especially for exam 3 and these final weeks, this is where everything starts to come full circle with everything we learned in the previous weeks. So what about hyperglycemia? Call back all the way to diabetes and blood glucose. Well, again, hyperglycemia, you have blood glucose above normal levels, right? Above 110 mg per deciliter. So what happens is that, well, if you have too much glucose in your blood, you're going to end up with a lot of glucose in your filtrate. If you have so much glucose in your filtrate that these transporters can't reclaim it back from the urine that's forming in the tubules, then it ends up in your urine. So this is what causes glycosuria, is the presence of glucose in urine because you exceeded this number right here. And there's also other terms that refer to other things, the presence of nutrients in your urine, amino aciduria, I know, very creative there, is when so again, ideally you should be reabsorbing close to, if not 100% of the glucose or amino acids that end up in your filtrate. But if you have too much of this in your bloodstream and it ends up exceeding the transporters that are lining your PCT, that's when you start to see them in the urine. Okay, so then PCT, so again, filtration is exclusive to the renal corpuscle. That's the very crude filter, just based on particle size, whereas the PCT, big important function of PCT, reabsorb the good stuff. It wastes no time, your kidneys waste no time in reclaiming nutrients and vitamins. And then secretion, so what does it secrete? Well, toxic metabolites like nitrogenous waste, ammonium, uric acid, urea, and drug metabolites as well. That's what I mean by xenobiotics.